So I'd like to welcome you to the League of Women Voters of Los Alamos Candidate Forum. I'm Barbara Califf. I'm co-president of the local league in Los Alamos. I'll be the moderator tonight. As I hope you all know, the League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose any candidate or political party. Our purpose with these forums is simply to educate the public and ourselves before we vote. I'd like to introduce Joanne Lisney, who's represented by our LWV icon in the bottom. She's our tech expert, and without her, we would not have been able to put on this Zoom webinar. Lynn Jones, above the icon, will be the timer, and she will read the questions. So we've invited the candidates facing opposition in the primary for 4 offices. They're all Democrats. We'll begin with State Senate District 5, then Public Regulation Commission District 3, then District Attorney for the 1st Judicial District, and finally County Council. For each office, the candidates will give their opening statements in ballot order. They'll have 3 minutes to do that. Then we'll have time for questions and answers. If you wish to ask a question, you can click on Q&A at the bottom of your screen and then type your question into the box. You can do that at any time, but I have 2 requests. First, please indicate for which office you intend the question, if it's for State Senate, etc. And secondly, please don't make any comments. This is not Facebook. We only want your questions. And the candidates can see the questions, although I've asked them not to open their Q&A box because it's distracting. But we don't want them to see anything inappropriate. Thanks. Each candidate will have, during the question and answer period, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. All the candidates will in the office will, running for an office will respond to each question. After the question and answer period, the candidates will have 1 minute each for a closing statement. And then we'll go on to the next group. So we're going to begin with the candidates for State Senate District 5, and you can see them on your screen. They're the incumbent, Richard Martinez, and Leo Jaramillo. So we will begin with Richard. Time for your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. Senator Richard Martinez, coming to you from Lojo Caliente, New Mexico. I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm interested in running again, and that I hope that everybody is healthy, safe, and happy during this pandemic. I know that it's very difficult for everyone, but I think that we need to continue stressing the distance, the social distancing, and being safe so that we can eventually get rid of this virus that we're all fighting. I've served in the New Mexico State Senate as your senator in District 5 for about 19 years. I'm in my 20th year, I believe. And during my tenure, I have introduced legislation that has affected my constituency very positively, and that it has affected a lot of my constituents, especially the elderly, the seniors, the veterans, disabled and regular veterans. I've always introduced legislation that takes care of my constituents, and I want to continue doing so. And I'm looking forward to the questions and answers. I hope that the questions are not personal in any means, but I will answer whatever questions that we have. And thank you, Barbara, and everyone for allowing me the opportunity to be here with you today.
You're welcome. Leo?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you to the League of Women's Voters for hosting this. I'm so very grateful to be with you virtually, even though we couldn't be with one another in person. My name is Leo Jaramillo, and I'm a native son of the Espanola Valley, and I am a candidate for New Mexico State Senate District 5. I'm currently the chair of the Rio Arriba County Commission, and during my time in office, those 16 months, I've taken on some really big initiatives. So I worked on ensuring that our employees received their first pay increase that they received for the first time in several years. I'm the only elected official who challenged the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, when they threatened to walk away from a plume that is threatening the drinking water on our Espanola West side. By challenging them, when they were leaving after their 10-year time period stopped, they found a second plume, which I then questioned and challenged that their timeline should start again in year 1. When that didn't happen, I then championed a resolution with my fellow commissioners. And so it got the attention of our national delegation, who then is standing beside Rio Arriba County to find a solution to that issue. I then also challenged the Sonic Corporation for moving next door into a predominantly residential area and stopping them from the effects they could have on the acequia in the San Pedro community. Now that enthusiasm and what I'm doing as a commissioner, I want to bring through to the Roundhouse as your senator. And as your senator, I can make sure that I will rebuild and strengthen our economy, provide access to affordable housing, ensure that every child has a secure, safe, and quality education, safeguard our drinking water, and restore credibility back to the District 5 seat. Now, I'm happy to be with you today, even though it's virtually, because Los Alamos is my home away from home. I'm a Chief of Staff Admin Officer at Los Alamos National Laboratory for one of the Associate Laboratory Directors, where I advise in human resources, finance, and strategic planning. And believe it or not, I'm a former coach and educator who worked on building a cohesive community with rival schools of Espanola Valley High School and Los Alamos High School. And by building relationships, I was then named as the New Mexico Activities Association's Coach of the Year. So Los Alamos is definitely my second home. But most importantly, I am you. I'm one of you Northern New Mexicans who wants what's best for our communities, who wants to see us thrive and move forward. And by being one of you, collectively, we will move Northern New Mexico forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we're ready for the question and answer period. Lynn, the first question will be for Leo. I think you're muted, Lynn.
Sorry, the usual problem. Should New Mexico consider alternative types of voting systems such as ranked choice voting? Explain.
What New Mexico should do is ensure that the primary is open. So that's one way to ensure that candidates. So what we're seeing in New Mexico is typically the winner of the primary is the winner of the take-all election. So in these type of elections, I really think that we need to open up the primary so everyone has a chance to vote for the candidate of their choice immediately during a primary. Now we're seeing something interesting with COVID, that we're now starting to see a different way on how we can elect candidates by doing the absentee ballot to make sure everybody is safe. But yes, I definitely think in the times that we're in, we should be looking at alternative ways on ensuring that we can elect candidates and increase voter participation.
Richard?
Same question?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a different question. Well, I've never been the biggest supporter of ranked choice elections, but I feel that we do need to do something about our elections. I think now would have been the perfect time to be able to do the mail-in by vote or the vote by mail-in. I think that is very important. This is a crucial time that we could have used it. And the only thing is that we would have to change, we would have to do it legislatively. And the timing is not there for us to have a special session before the election, being that it's only, 4 weeks away. So I think that we do need to make some changes. And I think that we've got a Secretary of State that really does a lot of work and a lot of, she introduces some really good legislation. She's doing a great job, and I will support her in whatever she chooses to endeavor. So we're always open for change.
Lynn, the next question, this will be for Richard first and then for Leo.
Okay.
What plans do you have to deal with a budget deficit you will face when you take office?
Well, I think number one, the governor has already made a lot of changes in our budget. She's cut quite a bit in Rio Arriba alone, and in some of our districts. I believe she cut like $4 million out of each capital outlay of the capital outlay appropriations that we got. So that's one way. Another way is to decrease spending. I mean, we cannot be dependent. Also, we can't be dependent on oil and gas. So we need to find out other revenues such as renewable energy. We've got the perfect climate for it. We've got plenty of sun, and I think that we need to open those avenues a lot more. As far as the deficit is concerned, I think that we're caucusing right now. As a matter of fact, we're scheduled for another caucus. We're also doing it through Zoom. So I should know a little bit better what the caucus plans I'm doing within a week or so.
Leo?
So I think what needs to happen is we need to make sure that we get some economists in who can help us in their field of expertise to steer New Mexico in the direction to not only see how we get the budget deficit by cutting, if we have to cut out programs, but this is a perfect time for us to look at the diversification of New Mexico's budget. So if you look at how we rely heavily on oil and gas, we then can look at different revenues to ensure that we can build up our budget and continue to move forward. So if we look at the new Green Deal and look at solar and wind and how we can work on making that a revenue source, we've heard from the governor who really championed recreational marijuana and how money comes into states who have done that. We need to diversify New Mexico's economy. But the hard thing about this is we're going to have to take some hard cuts to programs and pull money back in areas where there's already, where it feels statewide that budgets feel thin. We're going to have to start pulling back from social programs and programs throughout the state to ensure that we balance that budget until we can get the economy up and running again. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Lynn, next question. We'll start with Leo.
What are the top 2 reasons that are motivating you to run for the Senate?
So I've always been a community advocate and somebody who's wanted what's best for my community. Now I don't have children, so I think of my community as my child, raising it the best way that I can, leaving it better for when somebody else comes. But the whole thing is I want to be part of the solution. So we always hear people who talk about issues happening. One, I want to be part of the solution. And 2, I'm a servitude leader. Roll up my sleeves and get to work. I want to make sure that I can move northern New Mexico forward. I've got the passion, I've got the drive, and I'm ready for the challenge. And those are the 2 reasons and the 2 motivating factors behind me running.
Thank you. Richard?
I also think that I'm a very community-oriented individual. I've been serving in my community for quite a few years now. This is my 20th year as a state legislator. I also served in other capacities throughout the county of Rio Arriba, and I'm very proud of my voting record. In the past, I've introduced legislation that has really made an impact in a lot of the communities that I serve. Number 1, last year, I introduced Senate Bill 186, which made changes to the oil and gas industry. It changed how we treat bad actors. In other words, if somebody, the oil and gas industry didn't have the opportunity, or not the oil and gas, the Energy and Minerals Office or Division didn't have the opportunity or the resources to levy civil cases against some of these bad actors. So through this legislation, we were able to do that. And now, as long as it doesn't, the civil penalties don't exceed $10,000 a day or $250,000 in total, they will be responsible for what they are bringing to the table. And I've introduced a lot of other pieces of legislation. I'm very proud of my record. And I wish that we would have more than this allotted time so that I could explain some of these bills to the audience that we have today. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, Lynn, next question. We'll begin with Richard.
How can New Mexico increase access to broadband internet? Should there be a minimum standard of internet access guaranteed to every resident? And how can we achieve that?
Well, I think in the past, New Mexico has already been attempting that. I think Rio Arriba right now is I think they have that program that the state has. We have been financing that bill for a long time. It's very important that everybody have access to internet, especially in rural New Mexico, with all these telemarketing and telemedicine things that are happening now. But the thing is that everything is changing so fast that we don't have the opportunity to keep up with it. But we definitely need to work more on it. I sit on the telecommunications interim committee, and I'm hoping that we can push harder to ensure that everybody has access to internet.
Leo?
So we definitely need to make sure that we connect New Mexicans with broadband and internet. And so I've heard from all the CD3 candidates who also agree that this is part of the infrastructure New Mexico needs. We need to make sure that we connect everybody globally and by connecting people community to community. Now, one of my fears with COVID-19 is telemedicine and education. So the two bookends, if you think about it, the youth and our seniors. So youth, when we're seeing even here in Rio Arriba County, the number of students who don't have access to internet, who are going to fall behind from their classmates, who aren't going to be able to keep up, that's a major threat, because that's going to roll into the years to come, because that's our generations of our workforce that's coming up. Now, if you look at the opposite end, when we look at our senior population, when it comes to telemedicine, some seniors don't have broadband, some don't have a computer. And so then we put them at risk when we send them to hospitals during this COVID time to get checked on. By ensuring broadband is given to every New Mexican, we can connect them globally and ensure that we connect them in ways where things are definitely easier for them. But broadband's not the only solution. We're then gonna have to work on ensuring that they get the proper equipment, that they can access internet and make sure that they can do the things necessary to survive during our times. Thank you.
Thanks. So Lynn, we're ahead of schedule. We have time for 2 more questions, if you have 2 more. So next question, and this will be for Leo.
Okay, where do you stand on gun control?
So I do understand the importance of Northern New Mexican gun culture when it comes to hunting. And so that's something that we want to protect when you do it the right way. But I think about the story of young Cameron Martinez, who was gunned down near the Okeawinga Pueblo by somebody who had a weapon that shouldn't have been in his hands, who violently shot at a vehicle, killing young Cameron and hurting his friends. And then I also think about an uncle who committed suicide in front of my father. He showed signs of mental illness, but there were no programs or any laws that could have helped if we would have called and said we needed the assistance. My uncle shot himself in front of my father, and the effects of that lasted for years with our family. So I understand the importance of protecting the Second Amendment right when done right for that hunting culture. But I understand the importance of bills to protect each one of us so that we no longer have to hear of school shootings, or we no longer have to hear of somebody with mental health issues who took their life or even took the life of someone else. So I see the importance, and I see the importance of ensuring that there's legislation to keep.
Richard?
I think it's very important that we have legislation that controls firearms in New Mexico. That's one of the reasons why I chose to sponsor and carry Senate Bill 8. The bill was firearm sales background checks. It's a very simple, no-nonsense bill that I felt that we needed to have. I mean, you need a background check when you apply for a job at the laboratory. You need a background check when you accept an appointment from the governor in a commission or one of those commission meetings or whatever. And so why not have one when we have transfer guns? I think this was one of the most common sense bills that we've ever had. And thank God that we were able to pass it. It didn't pass with a lot of a majority, but it did pass, and the governor signed it, and I was very happy. And one of the first things that my opponent did is that he introduced a memorial or a resolution to make Rio Arriba a sanctuary city. And all we did was require a background check on the gun sale. So I am very, I feel that we need to do more towards this issue. And I'm sorry that my opponent felt that you didn't agree with it, apparently.
Thank you. Okay, this will be the last question. We'll start with Richard. Lynn?
Okay, what reforms would you suggest to our tax system?
Well, that's another story there. We've got so many tax credits and tax breaks out there that we were supposed to have worked on that a couple of years ago. And for whatever reasons, we haven't. And I think that we need to continue. That's one of the reasons why the legislature created the tax reform subcommittee, the interim committee. And to this date, I don't think that we've seen very many reform bills come out of that committee. And the thing is that if you have a committee and there is an issue before it comes to a regular committee, they ask if it's been vetted through the interim. So this is why it's important that those bills go through this Revenue and Stabilization Tax Committee, so that we can see what bills have to be revamped and what credits have to be removed. So I strongly think that that I don't have a solution for it because I serve on Senate Judiciary and I serve in conservation. But I feel that this is one of the reasons why I've also asked that they should alternate all of the members of the legislature so that we can all serve in either Senate Finance or House Appropriations.
Thank you. Leo?
Now, in talking to small business owners in the Espanola Valley, the one thing they talk about is corporations getting tax breaks where mom and pop shops don't get that. And so those mom and pop shops are the ones that are really, really trying to make it and make the community thrive and making themselves and their families thrive. And so they think they deserve that tax break. And so I agree that small business needs to have tax breaks. Now, I also believe that it's a progressive tax structure and we got to revise cuts for higher tax brackets. And so that's one way on how we can reform tax, but we definitely got to look at that upper tier and see how we balance that and make sure that small business gets part of that tax break as well.
Thank you. All right, now it's time for closing statements, and we'll begin with Leo. 1 minute.
Thank you so much. So I want to talk about my opponent did do the background check, but then voted against the red flag law and was quoted on saying he was worried about losing votes during the election. Now, as voters, you have a decision to make. You can then vote for a senator who's been in office for 20 years that the governor asked to resign for his position, who stepped down from his chairmanship roles and doesn't have the power that we did have in the Senate before. And you have a choice to take a chance on a freshman senator, one who is ready to roll up his sleeves as a servitude leader and spread the power of wealth with each one of us to ensure that we move forward. Somebody who is ready to work hard for northern New Mexico, for all of us collectively. And I want to remind you that I am you, and together, New Mexico, we are stronger together. Thank you.
Richard.
I just want to reiterate what I said earlier, that I think that I'm actually running on my record. If anybody wants to know what I've done in the last 20 years, all you have to do is go to my website and see the bills that I've introduced. The magnitude of bills, I'm sorry if my dog wants to get out, the magnitude of bills that I have that have benefited my district, not just Rio Arriba, but all of Los Alamos. I take care of Los Alamos also. I make sure that if there's a bill that affects Los Alamos, that I contact either the superintendent, the city county manager, and that I make sure that this bill is not going to affect them in any way. I did make a mistake, and I'm sorry. It's I regretted it ever since it happened, but I'm moving forward. And I do have the seniority, Leo, that I've always had. I might not be the chairman of judiciary, and nobody removed me. I would remove myself. I chose to do that. I felt that since we hear legislation that comes about DWIs and a lot of other things, that I felt that I shouldn't be the one in control of the agenda. But I am very much in control of my vote, and I do care a lot about the people that I represent. Thank you, and I want to come back. I want to stay there.
Okay, well, thank you both very much.
Thank you to everyone, and best of luck to you, Senator Martinez.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Okay, Joanne is now going to switch us to the Public Regulation Commission. Okay, the Public Regulation Commission regulates the utilities, telecommunications, and motor carrier industries. It also oversees pipeline and fire safety. A lot of responsibility. So we'll hear from the candidates for PRC District 3, Brian Harris and Joseph Maestas. We'll begin with their introductory statements. First with Brian. They'll each have 3 minutes. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters. My name is Brian Harris. And thank you very much to everyone in the audience who's shown up and listening to this. I remember growing up, my mom was a member of the League, and she always had some literature around from the League. And I remember her getting dressed up to go out to those movies, to the meetings. And I don't know, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the League of Women Voters, and I'm actually quite honored to be here right now and having the opportunity to address you. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about my background. I have been a lawyer for 30 years, and I'm running on a platform of good government and renewable energy. And in many ways, my career has been building up to this job of being a utilities commissioner. After college at Eastern Connecticut State University, I joined the Peace Corps. I taught English for 2 years in Central Africa in a small village in Gabon. And then I went to law school. I went to Vermont Law School and graduated in 1990. And I joined the Department of Commerce afterwards and worked for about 9 years in various aspects of telecommunications, computer networking, and government grant funding to make sure that all sectors of society benefited from what was then the brand new internet coming down the pike. It was exciting, and it was going to change our lives. And we've seen how that's happened in the past 30 years. And it's been quite interesting and exciting to be part of that. My last job in DC was working for the National Science Foundation. I helped conduct research with networked computers. We did 2 school systems, and the Department of Defense overseas school system, and looked at how these computer networks could help education. That's research that's especially become relevant in the last few months. I moved to New Mexico because I visited once and I loved it here. And I decided to make New Mexico my home. I am a human that lives in northern New Mexico and that has made it my home, and I'm fully committed to this state. I have worked at the Public Regulation Commission as both a telecommunications economist, and then afterwards I joined the Attorney General's office, where I was a ratepayer advocate for 10 years under Attorney Generals Madrid and King. Those were great years. I learned a lot about the network. I learned a lot about what ratepayers care about and what they need and what their interests are. Their interests are in low rates, of course, but also in reliability and ubiquity. You want everybody to have a chance to get on the network.
Okay, thank you. Joseph.
Well, wait a minute, is that 3 minutes?
Yeah, you didn't see the stop sign?
No. Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. And I want to thank the Los Alamos League of Women Voters for the opportunity to participate in this forum. And I want to just give a shout out to everyone that's participating in this Zoom conference. This pandemic has really forced us to really adapt and do things and move forward with this election. And speaking of elections, I want to thank the league in general for raising the level of information and awareness on the part of voters and helping them in a nonpartisan way to make informed decisions in elections. And that's very, very important. So my name is Joe Maestas. I'm running for the Public Regulation Commission, District 3. I'm running because I've dedicated my whole life to public service. I just retired. I served my country as a federal civil servant for over 30 years. I worked at all levels of the federal government, at the state level, the regional level, and in Washington. I've been an engineer throughout that entire time. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the states of New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. I also have a public service desire through being an elected official. I've spent 14 years as a local elected official, and that includes about 6 years as an Espanola city councilor, 4 years as mayor of Espanola. And when I moved to Santa Fe, I ran for city council there and represented District 2. I am a native New Mexican. I was born in Santa Fe and raised in Santa Cruz, down in the valley, just down the hill from Los Alamos. But I want to bring my mix of elected office experience, my experience as a practicing and licensed engineer, and my leadership. I have served in many statewide, national leadership capacities. Just to name a few, I served on the board of the National League of Cities. It represents all cities across the country. I was president of the New Mexico Municipal League. I was vice chairman of the Conservation Voters of New Mexico and chairman of the New Mexico Voices for Children. So I think that gives you an idea of not only my leadership experience, but my care about progressive issues like children. And lastly, I think, this election is about contrast. And I want everyone out there to know that it's important that you know the distinctions between both candidates. I'm the only candidate that is publicly financed. I launched a major grassroots effort to qualify, and I'm happy about that. And I bring a fresh perspective to the PRC. We all know that it's in need of reform, and with my experience, qualifications, and leadership, I can get that done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll have questions. We'll begin with Joseph. Lynn, what is the first question?
Last week, the PRC voted 3-2 to defer approval of 2 solar projects proposed to replace some of the electricity currently provided by the coal-burning San Juan generating station, even though the hearing examiners had recommended approval and they were approaching an April 30th deadline for the contracts. How would you have voted and why?
Well, I read the recommendation from the hearing examiners, and yes, there were some procurement timelines that they strive to meet. Those 2 recommendations, they were solar and battery hybrid projects. The hearing examiners, I think, really felt like these 2 projects were supported by all interveners with the exception of 2. So as a PRC commissioner, I felt their reasoning was sound. I would have approved it. The only question I had was the legal standard with regards to the location of those replacement power projects. The Energy Transition Act states that the replacement power must be located within the central consolidated district around the plant, up to 450 megawatts. Up to is kind of the operative phrase there. And so I was uneasy about that part of the hearing examiner's recommendation, but I would have ratified their recommendation. I thought it was very sound, and I think the reasoning to make the final decision to complete the replacement power, they had a deadline of September 30th. I think that would have allowed enough time for them to make the recommendations, and maybe in that intervening time, they would have maybe got a more definitive opinion about that legal standard regarding the location of the replacement power. So I think that was the only, the thin ice part of the hearing examiner's recommendations. And I listened in on the meeting, and I don't think that the 3 commissioners really explained their reason for deviating from the hearing examiner's recommendation.
Thank you. Brian.
Yes, I think that decision was baffling, and I would have voted the opposite way as well. It's really delayed the start of renewable energy investment to replace the San Juan resource that's going to be closing down in 2022. Now, I listened to the meeting as well, and what I heard was a fear of litigation. I guess they were referring to being appealed in the Supreme Court. I don't think that was a real problem. And yes, the ETA requires 450 megawatts to be placed in Central Consolidated School District of San Juan. And these two projects were only a small part of that. But what they would have done was gotten people working sooner, would have gotten money flowing into northern New Mexico, and would have gotten us one step closer to renewable energy. There was a lot of work that's been thrown out in last Wednesday's vote. That's a real shame. And as a commissioner, I would guarantee that when you come to us with a proposal, I'll do my work beforehand, not at the last minute when all the parties have weighed in. I'll be there reading the testimony from the beginning, understanding what's the outcome, what the likely outcomes are, and asking the right questions to make sure that we build a record that we need to get these projects going.
Lynn, the next question, we'll begin with Brian.
What should the PRC do to help ensure access to high quality broadband and internet service to underserved areas of the state?
Yes. For the past 13 years, the state has given about $330 million in what's called the Rural Universal Service Fund. It comes out to about $29 million a year. Several years ago, Senator Michael Padilla sponsored legislation creating a grant program that carves out $5 million of this fund to help support broadband investment projects. The majority of this money has gone to the biggest carriers in the state. And what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see different criteria applied to that grant program. I would like to try to unlock an unsung sector of New Mexico's economy, which is the ma and pa internet service providers that operate in almost every single community. They have survived a shifting and uncertain telecommunications business landscape now for decades. And they understand how to fill in that last mile. They understand how to interconnect with the big telecommunications carriers. And because of my background and expertise in communication, telecommunications, I look forward to working with all sectors of the industry to try to figure out the best way to start filling in these gaps. Most of the rural areas served by these rural co-ops need some help. And so that's one thing that I look forward to very much with when I'm elected commissioner.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, you know, access to high-speed broadband, I mean, that is a common denominator in many rural areas, from the Mississippi Delta to the rural areas in New Mexico. The irony is, I live about 2 blocks from the Christus St. Vincent Regional Medical Center, and based on the download speed, I live in an underserved area. Yet I'm 2 blocks away from a fiber optic ring that circles the medical sector surrounding St. Vincent. So we have some, you know, really messed up priorities here, but my opponent is right. We do invest in rural broadband through the New Mexico Rural Universal Service Fund. The fund itself, it's independently administered. It amounts to about 26 million. 5 million of that 26 million is invested in broadband. But we can expand the Rural Universal Service Fund. I'd like to see it go up from 26 million to 30 million. You know, when I was mayor of Espanola, I collaborated with Los Alamos County, especially during the recession, to create the Regional Economic Development Initiative, which helped create the ReadyNet. And it was a broadband initiative, but we need to really start regionalizing all these efforts. We need to bring in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. They have a significant national broadband program. We're not working enough together, and so there's a lot more that can be done.
Thank you. Another question, Lynn.
Okay, would you support a change in how commissioners are elected or appointed? If so, what would you support and why?
Joseph.
I think you're referring to the constitutional amendment that's going to appear on the November ballot. It's going to ask voters, are you in favor of amending the Constitution yet again to change the PRC from an elected to an appointed body? But the devil's in the details. It's also asking that it would downsize the commission from 5 to 3 members, 5 elected to 3 appointed. I'm the great-grandson of a constitutional delegate. His name was Jose Amado Lucero. And I think he'd be really, he's probably rolling around in his grave to see our state stuck in this merry-go-round of piecemeal constitutional amendments. We've come back full circle in terms of where we want to take the PRC. At some point, we need to decide that this is what we want to go with, and let's work to make it better within the existing framework. So I don't support voters losing their choice of selecting their PRC commissioners. It's been proven that in states where you have elected commissioners, utility rates are lower. One particular commissioner told me that we have the lowest rates in the country. And so look, we're seeing our national democratic institutions under threat. So why would we want to undermine our own democracy by taking our voice and choice away in this next or in future elections for public regulation commissioners? Thank you.
Brian?
Thank you. I've thought about this question a lot, and it is a fundamental question about how we self-govern. And I've concluded that we need to support this amendment. Utilities regulation is really not a job for a career politician or someone who's been a high-level generalist for most of their career. You need somebody who has a deep and in-depth knowledge, not only of the technology informing these networks that we regulate, but also of the legal standards and the legal processes that apply. That kind of knowledge will come from people who are appointed by the governor. I don't think that we're losing our voice because the governor's decision has to be made in conjunction with the Senate. And we all get a chance to vote for our senators. That's where the high-level representation should be taking place. PRC commissioners make quasi-judicial decisions. It takes a quasi-judicial temperament and understanding of the law to make sound decisions. And I think that through an appointed system, we would be able to reach that kind of expertise. And there are protections built into the proposal. The first appointee will serve 2 years, then 4 years, then 6 years. So they'll be staggered. I think also exciting is these are at-large appointees. That makes them really think about what's best for New Mexico as a state, instead of pitting these districts against each other and drawing some of the political fireworks that we've seen in past decades. So I'm supporting the amendment, and even though it would mean that I'm out of a job in 2 years, that's okay. I'm not a professional politician. This is my first election, and I'm confident that the governor, working with the Senate, can appoint the type of commission we need to regulate the industry that's vital to New Mexico's future.
Thank you. All right, now it's time for closing statements. We'll begin with Joe.
Well, again, I want to thank the League for giving us the opportunity to address a lot of the voters out there that perhaps are undecided. But I firmly believe that I have the qualifications, the experience, and the leadership necessary to hit the ground running. I'm not sure I know what a professional politician is, but I do know what a public servant is, and that's what I've been, not just in my 14 years as a local elected official, but serving my country for 30 years as a federal engineer. In terms of my temperament, my experience on quasi-judicial bodies, all the local government governing bodies that I've served on are quasi-judicial. We hear appeals from entities like planning commissions and historic design review boards, and sometimes we'll get a remanded case from a district court. So I have the temperament and the experience in working with other elected officials that have egos and solve problems like I have for 14 years very successfully. So thank you.
Thank you. Brian.
Thank you. I'll just pick up where I left off in my opening statement. I wanted to talk about good government. And that's a central element of my campaign here. Good government means collaboration. And I have a record of collaboration. I've been endorsed by the conservation voters of New Mexico. I've been endorsed by the New Mexico Building and Trades Association. Ex-mayors Javier Gonzalez and David Haas have endorsed me. Mimi Stewart has endorsed me. Ex-clients of mine, from asylum seekers to civil rights, people who've had their civil rights violated, have endorsed me. I know how to build relationships. I know how to collaborate. I know how to keep my head when things get a little hot. And at the PRC, things do get hot. When there's tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, things can get pretty intense at times. And it takes somebody with a real understanding and knowledge of the judicial process, the legal process, giving everybody a chance to be heard, a chance to contribute to the record that makes for a good commissioner. And if I earn your trust and if I earn your vote, those are the qualities I will bring to the commission. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both very much. It was very interesting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll hear the candidates for District Attorney for 1st Judicial District. So our candidates are Mary Carmack-Altwiee and Scott Fuqua. Is that correct? Okay, so we'll begin with the introductory statements. Mary, you start.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Carmack-Altwiee, and I am running for District Attorney here in the 1st Judicial District. I am a career lawyer who has always worked in criminal justice. I started out as a public defender down in Albuquerque, and then I moved on and had my own practice where I practiced all over the state in criminal defense. I did that for 10 years, and a little over a year ago, I got recruited by this district attorney's office to come and run the Special Victims and Violent Crimes Unit. And I got recruited because they recognized that I had trial experience and management experience that the office badly needed. And so I went over there, and I've been running that unit for about a little over a year. In that year, I've started a training program where we are training all of our attorneys and support staff once a week. Obviously, this was prior to the pandemic, on all kinds of trial issues and case analysis issues. I've also started a mentorship program so that we have our more experienced attorneys working and paired with our less experienced attorneys so that they learn how to do this job. It's a very difficult job, and it is the job that is the chief law enforcement officer of the entire 1st Judicial District. So all 3 counties, Santa Fe, Rio Arriba, and Los Alamos. And it needs somebody that understands criminal law on both sides, understands the players, the judges, the different attorneys that participate in the system. And I am that person. I have been endorsed by the FOP and the firefighters unions in Rio Arriba, Santa Fe, and Los Alamos. And I'm very proud of those endorsements. And I think that speaks to the fact that I bring a lot of experience and a lot of respect to the table. And I can bring people together to improve the office of district attorney. As a little way of introduction, I live in Santa Fe. I have 2 children, a 3 and an 8-year-old, and my wife, who is retired law enforcement. So I have always worked I've always been around the law enforcement field, both professionally and personally at home. So I'm excited to speak to you tonight and answer your questions, and I certainly hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I needed to unmute myself or not. Hi, my name is Scott Fuqua. I'm running for First Judicial District Attorney as well. I'm an attorney in Santa Fe. I've been here for the last 14 years. I've been an attorney for about 20. I came back to New Mexico after 5 years away, working for a law firm in Dallas, Texas, to take a job at the Attorney General's office. And while I was there, I worked in the litigation division for almost the entirety of Gary King's 2 terms. I was a staff attorney for the first 3 years and the director of that division for the following 4 years. In capacity as director, I had the opportunity to manage, at any given moment, give or take, about 18 attorneys and staff members. And we managed all of the state's litigation statewide through the Attorney General's office. I had the opportunity also to argue in front of the New Mexico Supreme Court about 40 cases and debrief probably about 200 more. I would say the case that I'm most proud of was having the chance to be one of several attorneys who argued successfully in the New Mexico Supreme Court for the recognition of the constitutional right to marry the person of your choice regardless of gender. And the thing that I think speaks most to the work that I did at the Attorney General's office is the fact that I have received endorsements from 4 recently retired Supreme Court justices, Justice Bosson, Justice Chavez, Justice Maestas, and Justice Serna, 3 of whom live here in the First Judicial District. They recognize not just what I brought to the table as an attorney in the courtroom, but they recognize the managerial and leadership skills that I developed and displayed when I was at the Attorney General's office. Now, we handled, like I said, all of the state's litigation statewide, and it ranged a host of different civil and in the Supreme Court, some criminal matters as well. And we got great results. It's something that I learned working at the Attorney General's office and managing people at the Attorney General's office is how to get the most out of the least, because one of the biggest things that law enforcement agencies all over the country have to deal with are limited resources. And the Attorney General's office is the chief law enforcement officer in the state of New Mexico and had the same kinds of limited resources that every law enforcement agency has to deal with. And in the face of those kinds of resource limitations, the best thing that you can do is help people in that office who are doing the work of the state do their jobs effectively and get the best that you can out of those people. And I was able to successfully do that for 4 years. That kind of leadership is critical to success as a district attorney, and that kind of experience is one of the biggest things that I bring to the table. I look forward to the opportunity this evening to answer your questions. Thank you very much for hosting this forum. It's great to have the opportunity to connect in any way with voters during this challenging time. And like I said, I look forward to your questions and thank you for your time.
Thank you. The question will be for Scott. Lynn, want to read the question? You're muted.
What improvements are needed in the office of the district attorney?
I think one of the big things, just sort of structurally, is the manner in which cases are assigned. It's, I think, important as a practical matter to make sure that the attorneys who are in court day after day on the ground, the ones who are doing the real rubber meets the road kind of work of the office, are stretched as least thinly as possible. And I say that because, the case volume, of course, is enormous. And there are significant demands on the time and the attention of the people who are doing that work. Now, one of the ways that you can help alleviate some of that pressure is making sure, to the greatest extent possible, that people don't have to be in more than one courtroom at the same time. And one easy way to do that is to assign attorneys as much as possible to judges, as opposed to assigning them, across the board on a particular class of case that might lead to the kind of situation where they're having difficulty meeting their obligations in multiple courtrooms. But the biggest thing that needs to change is the office needs some direction. There's been a little bit of a leadership vacuum over the last year or so, and that vacuum needs to be filled by somebody who understands how to manage an office of that size. Those, again, are skills that I honed and displayed successfully at the Attorney General's office that I look forward to bringing to the District Attorney's office.
Mary.
Yes, thank you. Well, to start with, attorneys are already assigned by courtroom. So that is not actually a problem that's happening at the district attorney's office, which is something that I know because I work in that office. The issues that need to be dealt with are that we do have an incredibly high volume. And the reason that we have an incredibly high volume is that we have not had a functioning, beefed up intake process. And what that means is when cases come in, they have just been assigned and assigned to attorneys, and then they have been they're supposed to see them all the way through. The way that I am attempting to change the office already, and the way that I will change the office, is that there will be frontline screeners, and I am part of that process now in the violent crimes unit, that take on these cases and make sure that the police have done everything that they've done, that they need to do, make sure that we make contact with victims in every single case, and make sure that these are viable cases. And if they're viable cases, then they need to get assigned out to attorneys and get taken on. When they're not viable cases, they need to be sent back to the law enforcement agency so that they can continue their investigation and make these cases better. So that's one of the most important things that needs to be changed at the office. I always talk about we need more quality prosecution rather than quantity. And so what that means is focusing our resources on the cases that are winnable, that are good, and that will make a difference in the community, and not focusing so much on the cases that, you know, are low-level drug offenses or just very low-level cases.
Thank you. Next question.
What can be done with young adults with intellectual disabilities who commit a crime instead of putting them in jail?
Mary.
That's a great question. So there's a program in Albuquerque that I actually worked with when I was a public defender and then as a private criminal defense attorney, and it's called the Mental Health Court. It's got a longer name, but it is a court program that's modeled on the drug court type program where a person is assigned to the program. They come in once a week and they meet with the judge, they meet with the probation officer, and they meet with the social worker. And every week they are monitored to make sure that they're meeting their obligations, whether that means they're taking their medications or they're getting help through healthcare for the homeless, and that they're staying out of trouble. And that is one of the courts that I've already spoken to the judges here in the 1st Judicial District about bringing up to the 1st from the 2nd, using the 2nd as a model. I think there can be improvements, but that is one of the things that we can do. I do not think that people with mental disabilities or mental illnesses belong in our jails. And unfortunately, our jails are sort of being treated as housing for mental illness or people that suffer from mental illness. And that absolutely needs to stop. And we will not be prosecuting those people in the sense that we won't be sending them to jail. We'll be trying to get them help to keep them out of jail and out of the system.
Scott.
There's, in addition to the program that Ms. Carmack-Altwiee was just talking about in Albuquerque, they're actually starting something that does similar kinds of things in the magistrate court here in Santa Fe. It's called Wellness Court. It's a little bit more directed towards substance abuse, but it does deal with some of the same kind of mental illness issues that seem to plague a lot of the people who find themselves caught up in the criminal justice system. And I couldn't agree more that those individuals are not best served, and society is not best served by seeing them put in jail. That doesn't fix any problems that can be fixed. There are programs operating in New Mexico here in the 1st Judicial District that are aimed at addressing those underlying issues that drive people to some of this repeat criminal behavior. And I think that the office, not just in the 1st Judicial District, but across New Mexico, could do a better job of partnering with some of those organizations and providing access to the kind of help that some of those people need. They're all-encompassing programs that deal with unresolved trauma, that deal with substance abuse issues, and that are designed to put people on a path to make them healthier and to make them more productive members of society. The power of the district attorney's office to further that kind of objective is substantial. And it would be my mission, and in fact, this is one of the things I've talked the most about when I've had the opportunity to talk to people on the campaign trail, is to expand that kind of program as much as it is conceivably possible to expand.
Thank you. Next question, Lynn.
What experience do you have managing a state agency budget?
Scott.
When I was at the Attorney General's office, I had at least secondary responsibility for the budget as it related to the area that I was managing. I didn't work in the budget office there at the Attorney General's office, but I did have substantial input into the manner in which the budget that we were requesting from the legislature was going to be appropriated, and specifically how it would be appropriated into the division that I was managing. I also did some work during the legislative sessions, lobbying both for some substantive issues that we dealt with at the Attorney General's office, and also on budgetary issues in an effort to get the resources that we needed at the office. So, you know, I did a little bit of work constructing a budget, did some work analyzing a budget, did some work on lobbying for the budget. And I'm not going to say that I was the primary person at the Attorney General's office doing that, because I wasn't. But I was one of the people that did have input into the manner in which the money that the office received was spent. And because of that input, I had some role to play in putting the budget together and in lobbying the legislature for the money that we needed to do our jobs.
Mary.
Yes. Well, as far as managing a state budget, a state agency budget, like Scott, I have not been solely responsible for that. But at the district attorney's office right now, I am part of a 4-person management team, and we are intimately involved in the budget process planning every single year. I've only been part of it for the last 2 sessions, and we have a budget analyst that puts the budget together based on our recommendations. And so I have been a part of that, and knowing what our budget is, what our constraints and what our needs are. That's what I've done with regard to a state agency. However, as I mentioned earlier, I also ran my own business for 10 years. And in that time, I learned all about budgets and bookkeeping and all of the things that go into keeping a business afloat. And I did keep it afloat, and I employed anywhere from 3 to about 10 people during that time period. That's not a whole lot of people, but for one person, that is managing a budget. And I'm happy to say that all 10 years, my business was profitable, and it was well run, and we kept on budget every single year. And I plan to take those skills that I learned and the skills that I'm learning now at the district attorney's office, planning the budget every year, to the head position as the district attorney.
Thank you. Do you have one more question, Lynn? Or should we?
How should non-violent drug offenders be treated?
Can you say that one more time? I didn't hear it.
How should non-violent drug offenders be treated?
Mary.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly how they're going to be treated in my office. We're going to divide the office into 2 big units. And the first unit is going to be devoted to nonviolent drug offenders and low-level offenders. And the idea behind the entire unit, the motto of the unit is get them out of the criminal justice system. Because a felony conviction has so many ancillary ways that it affects a person's life. And so what we're going to do is we're going to beef up all of our diversion programs and try to get those people not only into rehabilitation, but into trauma counseling, family violence counseling, job training, or education counseling, if that's what it is. And we're going to offer holistic and wraparound services so that these people, we can offer them a way out of their drug addiction, not just by treating the drug addiction, but by treating all of the other things that they bring that cause them to get addicted in the first place. And so we're going to treat those people by trying to treat this as a health issue rather than a criminal issue, and keep them out of the criminal justice system.
Scott.
You'll notice some similarities here. Ms. Carmack-Altwiee and I think, see this issue very similarly. The way to treat people I don't remember exactly how the question was worded, but how will you treat low-level drug offenders? I think the answer is with treatment. One of the things that, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but one of the things that I have actually enjoyed the most about the opportunity to meet people when it was still possible for us to be doing that was the number of potential community partners I had the opportunity to talk to about programs that they run that are specifically designed to help people who are struggling with drug addiction. I've begun to call it the criminalization of addiction, and I believe that in my lifetime, it is the single biggest policy failure in the country. It's done nothing to address the underlying problem, and it has only served to swell our prison populations to levels that are virtually unheard of in Western democracy countries, democratic countries. And the only solution is to provide people the opportunity to walk a path that makes them healthier and that allows them to become productive members of society, because that criminal behavior is driven by addictive behavior, which is driven by other behaviors, unresolved traumas and those kinds of things. And it does need to be an all-encompassing approach. Like I said, there are several community partners that I've had the opportunity to speak with who provide those kinds of services that I think the DA's office could very profitably partner with, and I intend to help the diversion programs and to help these people get the help that they need.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it's time for closing statements. We'll begin with Scott.
Thank you. In closing, I just want to return to one of the themes that I had hit when we first had the opportunity to begin addressing everyone here, and that is that the job of the elected district attorney is unfortunately not really to try cases. And I say unfortunately because the courtroom professionally is my favorite place to be. I'm very comfortable and effective in the courtroom, but the elected district attorney is there to make the trains run on time. And that's something that I did for 4 years with excellent results at the Attorney General's office. Results that were good enough, like I said, to earn me endorsements from 4 recently retired Supreme Court justices, 3 of whom live in the 1st Judicial District. And those kinds of skills are absolutely essential. They're critical to making sure that the office does what it's supposed to do, and that the people working in the office are able to do their jobs effectively and efficiently. And that efficiency is a big piece of that. Having worked as a government lawyer and supervised people in a government lawyer capacity, I understand how efficient you have to be in the face of those resource limitations, and that's something that I intend to bring to the office. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mary.
Thank you. The job of the district attorney is to know how to try cases and to know how to handle the criminal justice system. And you can only do that if you've worked in the criminal justice system. The reason that it's important to know that is so that you can effectively manage the people underneath you. Even if you're not actually trying cases, you know what it takes for them to try cases, what it takes resource-wise, what it takes brain power-wise, what it takes to get convictions and get violent criminals out of our community. So that's the experience that I bring to the table. I do have tons and tons of criminal justice and trial experience. However, the important experience is that I know what I'm doing and how to do it. And that's how I will manage the district attorney's office. And I think that speaks to, or the endorsements that I've received speak to not only that experience that I have, but how I'm already managing it. Your state representative in Los Alamos, Christine Chandler, has endorsed me because she knows that I have what it takes to run it. Also, every single lawyer at the district attorney's office now has endorsed me, including 40 lawyers that from district attorney's offices around the state. I think that speaks to the experience that I bring to the job. Thank you.
Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we will hear from county council candidates. As you know, there are 3 seats up for election, and we have 4 Democratic candidates. So one of them will be eliminated in this round, and then we will have another forum before the general election. So we have Denise Derkacs, Greg White, Sean Williams, and Rodney Roberson. And they will begin with statements. They'll go in ballot order. So we begin with Denise.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm running for county council because I want to help Los Alamos County plan for growth and embrace the future while preserving the past and the amenities that make Los Alamos a wonderful place to live. As a 38-year resident of Los Alamos County and a retiree from Los Alamos National Laboratory after 20 years of employment, I have both the desire and the time to study and address the challenges currently facing the county. My professional experience as Chief of Staff at Division, Directorate, and Principal Directorate levels, and my interactions with senior management in the planning and tracking of organizational performance are directly applicable to a position on the County Council. This is my first run for elected office, but I've been a volunteer member of the Community Development Advisory Board since its formation in 2018. Since then, I've also been attending County Council meetings, learning about how County Council functions and about the issues currently facing the county. I recognize three overarching issues facing the county in the immediate future: the need for low and middle income housing, downtown revitalization to enable small business development and sustainability, and community services to support growth and sustain our quality of life. The 2019 County Housing Study identified the need for more than 1,600 additional low and middle income housing units for rent or for ownership. I support the council's effort to explore all housing options and all possible building sites to meet community needs, and importantly, to solicit public input on all the options under consideration. I believe that downtown revitalization in Los Alamos and in White Rock is essential for a thriving community. County processes should be streamlined to facilitate small business development and sustainability to support a growing population in the county. To further support growth, the county should prepare to upgrade its services, particularly its infrastructure, utilities, transportation, recreational facilities, parks, trails, open spaces, and to the extent allowed, our state-funded public schools, all the things that contribute to the quality of life that we value and want to preserve as the county grows. These are the overarching focus areas that I've identified, but I hope to learn from county residents, the people I hope to represent on the County Council, about their specific needs and concerns. Los Alamos has been my home for 38 years. I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I have lived in 10 states. But together with my husband, Dennis, I chose to live here in Los Alamos, to raise our 3 sons here, and to stay here in retirement. Now I hope to help the county embrace its future while preserving its past by serving on the County Council. Thank you.
Greg.
There we go. My name is Greg White. I am a candidate in the Democratic Party for County Council. And the reason why I'm running is very simple. I have lived in town for almost 8.5 years, and I am fed up with the can't do attitude that seems to be overwhelmingly present in both elected officials and appointed and hired employees of the county. I believe in a can-do attitude. Anybody that would like to see a little bit of what that's about, I invite you to request from records my emails for the month of April and May so far with the County Council and its members, and you can see how much I've pushed them to do something to help our small businesses and our unemployed citizens during this hard time of this coronavirus. I'm also fed up with every time I turn around, trees and grass being ripped out of downtown. This is Los Alamos, 7,000 feet up in the beautiful mountains of northern New Mexico. It is not the middle of Times Square in New York. And that is what it seems the county wants to turn it into, a concrete jungle. And I'm also tired of the blight. And the county always has some reason why some new business or some endeavor has to have brand new land and their brand new building and everything, and nothing can be done about any of the empty buildings and abandoned buildings. So basically, that's why I'm running for county council. I believe Los Alamos can become a much more habitable and friendly place to live.
Thank you. Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Williams. I'm running for Los Alamos County Council. So I guess one thing about me is that I do actually bridge a lot of gaps within the Los Alamos community. So I am a former Labbie and PhD, and I do have a decent handle on what goes on the other side of the bridge. I'm also a small business owner, so I'm the co-owner of Automotive Professionals. So that also means that I have pretty strong ties to the blue collar side of our county, as after all, we employ auto mechanics, and a lot of the sort of blue collar people come through here. And I'm also already kind of part of the local government in that I'm a planning and zoning commissioner. So when I went around talking to all the current county councilors while deciding whether or not to run, one of them told me that you'll be completely bewildered for the first year. I think that I have the background now to go in and hit the ground running. So with that said, as a small business owner, of course, my biggest concern is the state of the business community in the state of downtown. And that is the thing that I primarily focus on, though I do care just as much about smaller issues than that. I guess I'd like to say a bit about low-income housing, as I think it's a bit underappreciated how much low-income housing is a business community issue, right? That we have housing that's sort of price-wise scaled to lab employees, and lower income people get pushed out of the county. And as a result, staffing is inconsistent and difficult and seasonal. And that is kind of a long-term problem for business as well. So I guess I'm not really going to go on for 3 minutes because I'm generally more interested in answering questions than in just sort of rambling on myself. So I'm going to go and wrap this up and bring us closer to the question and answer section.
Rodney.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for inviting us out this evening. I certainly like the opportunity to address everyone and the voters of Los Alamos County. I am Rodney G. Roberson. I am running for Los Alamos County County Council. And the reason I'm doing that is I come from a service background. First of all, my service began almost 40 years ago as an active duty Marine. I was in the Marine Corps for 20 years. In that time, of course, things like leadership, commitment, service, courage, physical and moral, honor, those type things are what I was developed and build a foundation that I've carried with me since my time in uniform. Following my retirement in 2003, I continued to serve in a capacity, in a variety of capacities, being as a professional emergency management, professional. That was my job as well at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. At the local level, of course, as an emergency management professional, I engage with the community on different issues. Here again, not only those times of emergency or disasters, but in those times when things are, as we call those blue sky days, when things are not bad. Those are the times we get out and engage with our community and learn what's going on in the community and decide and figure out how to make things better for the citizens. Here again, that was at the local level when I was a deputy director for a small town in Georgia. At the state level, here again, working with different agencies, for example, the United States Army during the Chemical Stockpile Emergency Preparedness Program, where we engaged some of the communities that lived and worked around those communities. We also engaged with them to make things better for them. And last but certainly not least, as a FEMA employee, here again, engaging in the community, getting to know the community, making sure that we met the needs of that community. Some of those skills, that skill set that I've developed over my 40 years of living, are the type things that I plan to bring to Los Alamos County and the citizens of Los Alamos County. Here again, I'm not a politician. I'm not a I'm a public servant, not a politician. And my intent is to bring everything that I have to bear to offer the council as well as the citizens of Los Alamos County and making it a better place for all of us to live. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, time for questions. So Greg will get the first question, which is Lynn.
County Council, do you support Council's recent decision to implement a prevailing wage of $15 per hour? And will you vote to continue it when elected?
I honestly haven't had time to study or talk to, mostly because of the current virus crisis we're in, go around to small business owners like Mr. Williams and see what they think of that idea, how it will end up impacting their business. Most of my life, I was very low income, earning less than $25,000 a year, sometimes less than $15,000 a year. So I certainly do sympathize, especially now, since I'm disabled and have an even more limited income, with the people that are having a hard time making ends meet, let alone trying to raise a family with 2 or 3 kids and are basically making minimum wage. And a tax structure that is a lot wider, like Santa Fe or Albuquerque, there might be a different impact to businesses than there would be for us here in Los Alamos that has a very small tax structure as far as the small businesses go. I certainly feel that larger businesses like Smith's should easily be able to afford that $15 an hour.
Sean.
Thanks. So I believe the question is actually referring to county employees, right? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
I assume so.
Yeah, so this was part of the budget hearings that just went on. So I think the thing that to me is most interesting about the discussion that council had last week about the prevailing wage is that there is only one current employer on council, and that's Antonio Maggiore. And he was absolutely for it, and he brought up the point. He's an employer. He would never pay somebody below $15 an hour, and we wouldn't either. So I think particularly when it comes to the county government, yeah, he's right. Wages are fundamentally a moral issue, and the county should not be paying anybody, a substandard wage. So I absolutely support it, and I will absolutely fight for it if and when it comes up next year.
Rodney.
Yes, my answer is yes. $15 is a living wage. Obviously, anything below that living wage doesn't give anyone an opportunity to kind of prosper, really. It's kind of putting them in a situation where they're not going to ever get out of poverty, in a sense. Obviously, I, from one, like Greg, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I worked all of my life to get to where I am today. And I've had an opportunity to get a decent salary along the way. And I certainly would like the opportunity to give someone else an opportunity to earn a living wage as well. Thank you.
Denise.
So paying county staff a competitive wage is definitely the right thing to do. I did hear the wage discussion during the council budget hearings. And from the business case perspective, the newly hired bus drivers were being trained for a CDL license and then leaving for higher paid positions in other locales. So this high turnover rate costs the county money and certainly justifies the wage from the business perspective. But from a moral and social perspective, paying the county staff a living wage is absolutely the right thing to do, and I wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you. Lynn, next question.
Significant sections of our downtown are empty or poorly used. Since this is private land, how can the county address this problem?
Sean.
Thank you. So my belief about downtown is that the reason it's gotten into the state that it's in is because the county allows negligence to be cheap. And I think, you know, you talk about the issue of private property. So yeah, that's true. But the county does have the power to make negligence expensive. And I think that doing that would clear up a lot of the blight that we have. And people talk about the vacancy tax. My understanding is that the county's position is that the vacancy tax is illegal. I'm willing to believe that. But one thing that the county can do is impose modern design standards onto existing commercial property. As after all, if you put this in accounting terms, what downtown is a big pile of deferred maintenance. And what we can do is make that deferred maintenance current. And we can do that through the development code. Thank you.
Rodney.
Yes. Here again, economic development is one of those things that drives the downtown and how it looks. Blight is one of those things that we all should be working to fight against, because blight sends the wrong message. And it's certainly from a tourist attraction standpoint, that's something we certainly do not want in our downtown areas. My thinking is that some of the programs such as Main Street USA and some of the other programs could be used to enhance the downtown and what it looks like. At the same token, just taking some of the revisiting some of those subjects and topics and making those points, making those issues a point, would drive that message home as well, as far as how we want our downtown to look and what we want Los Alamos County, Los Alamos downtown to look. Is one of those things that we should all fight for. Thank you.
Denise.
So the vacancies in the business community are definitely a problem. The shopping centers are privately owned, so it's difficult to address these vacancies. The county is losing gross receipts tax when these properties remain vacant. We need to investigate whether the county can assess fines for extended vacancies, and explore other options that will motivate the property owners to rent their properties. I would be willing to consider zoning changes that would prevent office use in retail spaces to help lower rents, and any other options that we can reasonably use to address the issue. There isn't an easy answer to this, but it's definitely something that the council needs to actively address in the near future.
Greg.
There's a U.S. Supreme Court case called, let's see here, Kello, K-E-L-O-V, New London, for anybody who'd like to read it. And that's basically where, a while back, more than 10 years ago, the town of New London, Connecticut, decided that they wanted more tax revenue and could do that by taking privately owned and occupied by the owners' homes away from them and giving it to a private developer. The U.S. Supreme Court found there was nothing wrong with this. Now, when we have situations like in White Rock, where strip malls went vacant for so long, they literally became a hazard to falling down and injuring people, and where we have the situation where Smith's basically has abandoned their old place, then even things that have, I've heard, some kind of contract that the county signed with Smith's, giving them the new land for their new place, anti-competitive clause. But at this point, when the old Smith's been empty for 6 years, there certainly is a very good case there to take the land by eminent domain and do something useful for the county, whether it's a convention center or low-income housing.
Thank you. Next question, Lynn.
What are your views on banning single-use plastic bags and styrofoam?
Rodney.
That's one I hadn't really put a whole lot of thought into, Lynn. I would say that I would certainly would like to take a closer look at that issue and position myself in a better to address that one. At this time, I'm not positioned to address that one directly.
Denise.
So some years ago, the county did attempt to ban plastic bags, and the public did not support it at that time. Currently, the county is not actively moving forward to do that, but I would support the ban of both plastic bags and styrofoam, providing the members of the community support it. I mean, that's critical to any decisions that the county makes on this issue. In parallel, there are many other things that the county can do and is doing to reduce the carbon footprint, and I wholeheartedly support its efforts for recycling and composting and other things that are currently being undertaken in the county.
Greg.
I certainly believe that reusable bags, I use reusable bags when I go shopping, is the best way to do your shopping. Obviously, there are numerous problems with plastics, whether it's from getting into animals like bears and coyotes' stomachs and messing them up, or the styrofoam just not breaking down. There are some alternatives for recycled plastics that are very much like styrofoam, but still, plastics take a long time to go away from our environment. And paper bags really aren't the answer, because we need as many trees as we can keep, not just in the county, but around the world. We're getting to a serious problem with the lack of forestation to just provide enough oxygen for people to be able to sustain life. And so I firmly believe anything we can do to encourage the use of, and perhaps even incentivize or subsidize the use of reusable bags is the way to go for shopping.
Sean.
Well, I feel like I'm about to be a hypocrite since I'm drinking from a disposable plastic bottle. But I do support the ban of plastic bags. My main concern with any sort of county regulation of business is whether or not it creates competitive advantage for any particular player. And my feeling is that a blanket bag or a blanket ban on bags would probably have the effect of driving costs up slightly across the board, but it doesn't create differential effects on businesses. And I do think that plastic bags are enough of a menace to justify a pretty heavy-handed approach to them.
Thank you. Lynn, next question.
Is there a recent major decision made by County Council that you opposed? And if so, why? And how would your position be different?
Denise.
There is nothing offhand that I can think of that I outright opposed. I did have some concerns about the giving the land to Marriott Corporation for the development of a convention center. I do acknowledge the need for a convention center, but I had strong reservations about giving them the land to build this. I would have liked to have explored other options for that.
Sean.
So probably not as high impact as the Marriott Lida, but one thing that is currently developing with council where I do disagree concerns the pilot program for food composting. So Public Works gave a presentation on composting to council in which they were given two non-exclusive choices of doing a pilot program, that is getting a commercial food or a big food composter, or doing a feasibility study, or both. And council seems to be headed in the direction of doing the pilot or doing the feasibility study and not the pilot program. I think that council should be doing the pilot program as well, for the simple reason that you learn a lot from doing that you don't necessarily learn from studying. And I think that Public Works would gain an awful lot of insight into the trials and tribulations of large-scale food composting by actually doing it.
Rodney.
Yes, I've had a limited opportunity to review some of the council decisions. Those that I have heard and observed, I have no objections to any of those at this time. So I'm fairly comfortable with the decisions they've made to this point. Thank you.
Greg.
I wasn't sure if you were ready for me. I wouldn't say necessarily recent, but two things that have concerned me recently are the revelation back a month or so from the county manager, Harry Burgess, that while we had emergency plans for things like fires, there had been no emergency plan whatsoever developed pre-virus for having any kind of health emergency involving possibly a lot of people, like this pandemic. I think it's the job of the council to be proactive in making sure, as part of their oversight function, and that's why you elect people like us candidates here to be the leaders in your community, is to lead the government and not have county government lead us. The other thing is there's several lawsuits that the county continues to fight, even though they admit wrong doing in the suits, like the lady that works in purchasing, that the county freely admits they don't pay her the salary they should be paying her as much as her male colleagues make. It makes no sense to waste our money fighting lawsuits when we're in the wrong. You know, if you want a living wage for your employees, then pay them the same as men.
Thank you. Lynn, next question.
What, if anything, can the council do about the extremely high rents that prevent entrepreneurs from opening businesses and paying decent wages?
Sean.
So yeah, Denise actually alluded to this earlier. So I do strongly believe that the high commercial rents are driven by the lab and lab contractors, as they just pass costs on to the lab. So I think the way that we get around that, or the way that we bring rents down, is by changing the commercial zoning to disallow first floor offices. That would then have the effect of displacing the lab onto higher floors and making sure that retail spaces are actually used by retail, and also that retailers are not forced into competition with the federal government for limited space. So yeah, I think that if that change alone happens, we will start seeing huge changes in the commercial landscape.
Rodney.
Yes, given the shortage of office space in the area and to begin with, and the shortage of land, obviously those rates are gonna tend to be higher. But as Sean mentioned, I think there's ways to those can be negotiated and mitigated that will allow for some incentives, subsidies to be put in place that will allow for those rents to be allow for cheaper rates. Thank you.
Greg.
There is a wide range of things that could be done and are within the law called the Local Economic Act, and it has been done by the county in the past. Like for instance, they loaned UB/Quid the money for that company to purchase the building they were in so that they didn't have to keep paying exorbitant rates. And of course, UB/Quid will pay the money back. There's similar things, I believe, that could be done for a lot of our small businesses. Just as I've tried to push the council with helping our small businesses during this virus crisis, that certainly fall into what the intent of the Local Economic Act is. And that's to create, maintain, and expand business and business opportunities for the local government and its citizens. And it's just disappointing to me that during this time of crisis, the council just isn't getting as creative with helping our businesses as they have been in the past.
Denise.
So as I stated earlier, and as Sean also stated, I would be open to considering zoning changes that would prevent office use in retail spaces to help lower rents and make the properties more affordable for new businesses. I am not sure what can be done, but I'm certainly open to exploring this option and see what the Planning and Zoning Commission can come up with and present to the council to consider.
Thank you. Last question, Lynn.
To what extent should council be looking for ways to support struggling residents, including measures such as we currently have utilities relief for qualifying families?
Denise.
So I think the county should do whatever it can within its purview to help low-income residents. The assisting with utility bills is certainly one way to do it. I'm not actually sure how much the county government is permitted to do under the scope of its charter, but I support looking into it. And I certainly support all the organizations in the county that help local residents, such as the Self-Help Program, the Christian Concern Committee, and the various other groups in private organizations throughout the county. But again, I'm definitely open to the council exploring options to help the low-income residents of the county.
Sean.
Yeah, I guess my answer is fairly similar. So of course, I know with business, there's always discussion of anti-donation issues. I don't think that those are nearly so bad with residents. And I know that the county, of course, has a community services division, which I don't come into contact with too often with the things that I do. That said, I do definitely support grant funding to nonprofits. I know the county already does a fair bit of that, and I'm always open to expansion of funding for nonprofits to help people, with unmet needs. And, you know, likewise, the expansion of the services that the county currently provides, particularly in this time of pandemic. You know, I'm not going to linger on it, but since the question of deficits came up earlier with the state senators, you know, I am Keynesian to the core when it comes to local government. So, you know, particularly during this time of pandemic, I do think that it is the duty of the county government to keep up spending and more likely expand spending to meet the spending and income gap that is caused by the pandemic.
Rodney.
Yes, I certainly support the efforts to offset the expenses and provide for low-income housing or low-income employees and making them, providing them the services, whether that be through community services and some of their options, or developing a group or to facilitate a study to find the root cause. That's the main thing, is just finding out why there is a low-income community, and so that way you solve the problem and not just the cause. You solve the cause of the problem, not the problem itself. And I think that would be a better approach than just, for lack of better words, throwing money at a problem that's going to continue. We want to find a way to resolve the problem once and for all, and that would be my approach to doing that. Thanks.
Great.
Well, two things I've already suggested to the county. There's a number of county employees that are still needing to report to work. People like in the utilities department, so that when customers call in to pay their bill, that kind of thing. Supervisors and whatnot, the county clerk's office this time of year and stuff. And rather than risk somebody unknowingly bringing to their office the coronavirus on food containers or touching the same refrigerator handles or something, I've suggested what the county should do is to set up a fund whereby they, on a rotational basis, go through our restaurants in the county to have food delivered to the county building for the employees. And this way, we're helping our small business restaurants to stay in business and their employees, and we're also providing a safer environment for the employees. I certainly support expanding the current utility program of not shutting anybody off and making a commitment to not shut anybody off from utilities or go to collection or anything without having a very public and transparent way of people to make some sort of minor payment arrangements, even if it's as low as like $5 a month, until they're back on their feet.
Thanks. Lynn, do you have another question?
What ideas for economic vitality in Los Alamos would you support and encourage? Why?
Greg.
One thing I've pushed for years, and it's part of the can't do attitude of county employees, is we have one hockey rink already that is NHL regulation sized. Now, there are some logistics issues there, but one thing I've pushed for is whether we use that rink or build a new rink. The NHL every January 1st has what they call a classic game, whereby two of the original teams of the NHL play in an outdoor setting. And I can't think of a better outdoor setting than the beautiful mountains and wildlife and everything that we have here in Los Alamos. And when you think about the revenue that could bring in, not just for Los Alamos, but surrounding communities, the television royalties alone, I mean, this game is televised worldwide. Okay, so that the people here, the television crews, the hockey players, the visitors and everything, I mean, we would be talking about bringing several years worth of revenue to this town in 1 week.
Sean.
So I do fundamentally believe in entrepreneurs. I mean, I know several of them, and they're great. I mean, I'm married to one. So I think that the big the big answer to this question is we need to make it possible to do business in this town. And the way that we do that is by, I'm just going to be really blunt about it, breaking the power of the landlords, right? They are the impediment to doing business in this town. I think that if the commercial property market can get cleared up some, that economic vitality is just going to follow in its wake. I'll also say that personally, I don't support tourism initiatives at this time because my greatest fear is that people will come to Los Alamos following a tourism initiative, get here and say, and then go home and tell everybody never to come to Los Alamos. And it would take us decades to shake that, or at least years to shake that reputation. So as a result, I think we have to clean up downtown first and then start looking at tourism initiatives.
Rodney.
Yes, I'm gonna, here again, I've only been in Los Alamos almost 3 years now, but one of the first things I noticed when I got here was the lack of some of the more traditional, I'm gonna say a bad word, chain type restaurants and whatnot. Here again, I'm not sure exactly why that is or why we can't bring some of the more popular restaurants into Los Alamos, but that would be certainly something that I would take an interest in finding out and trying to figure out how we could go about pursuing that. In addition to that, I would be interested in finding out why there's not any additional activities or recreational activities for our youth. That's something that I would be interested in trying to figure out what we can do differently in that area as well, because I think that's something we should be doing. And that's my feedback on that question. Thanks.
Denise.
So when I moved here 38 years ago, there was no aquatic center, no Mesa Public Library, no environmental educational center. But there were actually some more chain businesses. There was a Taco Bell, there was a Baskin Robbins for a time. So the community has changed over the years. My understanding, Rodney, to the issue with the chain stores is the requirements of the companies themselves, that Los Alamos doesn't meet their criteria. We also lost a Hallmark store several years back. I don't have the answer on how to bring these things back, but I agree with what Sean said, that rents are definitely one of the issues, as well as what I mentioned, the corporate requirements. It is definitely an issue that the county faces, and the county should definitely look into this, possibly do an exploratory study on what it can do to help bring things back into the county. It's an issue that the county council should look into and hopefully take action on in the future.
Thank you. All right, it's time for closing statements, and we're going to go in reverse ballot order. So we begin with Rodney.
Yes, in closing, here again, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting us out this evening. As also stated earlier, I'm new to this public service business, or this public official business. I've always been a public servant, and I look forward to having the opportunity to serve on the county council. As I stated earlier as well, I think I bring 30+ years of commitment, service to the communities I've been involved with. That hasn't changed with me coming to Los Alamos. I look forward to the opportunity to getting my rolling my sleeves up and getting my hands dirty and doing that. I'm not ashamed of working hard and believing in what I'm doing. All that being said, I look forward to the opportunity, and I look forward to the voters' opportunity to talk with the voters, working together for a dynamic future in Los Alamos. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean.
Yeah, so I know this has been sort of a strange or difficult year to try and figure out how to even run a campaign. So I'm definitely impressed with how quickly the League of Women Voters, has managed to change gears and put this together. So congratulations and thanks for hosting this. So I, as the questions that were asked tonight indicated, the state of the business community is a big deal, and I have firsthand experience in why things are the way they are, and I do have the courage to make the changes that are necessary. Thank you.
Greg.
Well, first, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and Barbara and Lynn for hosting this for us tonight. Anybody that may have noticed me looking over this way or making a gesture with my hand as my dog is becoming worse and worse at wanting in the house, barking and pawing on the door. I'm not gesturing towards Lynn. It just happens to be where I'm set in this. I'd also like to give Mr. Roberson a very big thank you for not just your years of public service, but years of military service in the Marine Corps. Thank you, sir. I think I'm a good candidate for the council in that over my life, I've kind of been a little bit of jack of all trades in that I've had a law enforcement background at federal and local level. I've been a paralegal. I've been in purchasing. I've been in construction. There's just a wide range of things that I've had experience in that the county council ends up dealing with in one way or another.
Thank you. Denise.
So thank you again to the League of Women Voters. I'm running for county council because I want to help Los Alamos plan for growth and embrace the future while preserving the past and the amenities that make Los Alamos a wonderful place to live. As a longtime resident of the county and a retiree from the laboratory, I have both the desire and the time to study and address the challenges currently facing the county. I hope to apply my personal experience raising a family in the county and my professional experience as a chief of staff at the laboratory to serving on the council. I've been attending county council meetings for almost 2 years, learning about how the county government functions and about the issues currently facing the county. My decision-making will always be based on accumulating facts and analyzing data, and importantly, on input from the general public. I look forward to serving on the county council and to representing the people of Los Alamos. I humbly ask for your vote in the upcoming election.
Okay, thank you all very much. That wraps up the we've spoken to all the candidates now, and I really appreciate the fact that all the candidates came out tonight. This forum has been recorded. We plan to post it on YouTube. We'll send the link to the candidates and the press. There will be a link on our website at lwvlosalamos.org. You can also find more information about the election in our voter guide, which Los Alamos residents received in the LA Daily Post on April 23rd, and it is also on our website. Early voting begins tomorrow at Council Chambers at the Municipal Building. The county clerk will begin tomorrow to mail out ballots to people who've applied for them. So don't forget to vote. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.